2.2.2 From Problems to Solutions, Assumptions and Rationals, Part 1. As usual, this lecture builds upon the former ones. We have stressed the importance of using a conceptual framework to determine what data information should be collected and help to organize this information and data for further analysis. And then you have moved in your group to do causal analysis to create a problem tree. With this background established, we can now turn ourselves into generating potential solutions, identifying the conditions that need to be in place in order to achieve an overarching goal. So what we're going to do now is to elaborate on a solution tree. Later on, in the second part, we will also explore assumptions, rationals, and the risks involved in achieving each of the solutions that you are proposing along the path, the causal pathway of your solution tree. So what are the learning objectives? We aim at learning how to convert a problem tree into a solution tree which is the step before the theory of change, let's say theory of change graphic, on which you will base your theory of change narrative afterwards. And we will learn in this lecture also to identify domains of change and pathways of change, especially nonlinear pathways of change, meaning that there is always interactions between the different sectors that you have managed to understand and to put into the solution tree form. Let's take the first step, which is to convert the overarching problem statement into the project goal. We have drafted a strong overarching problem statement, and now we will use this statement to define a problem goal. We will convert it into a problem goal. So the goal should specify the kind of enduring change we hope to see in the lives of a certain impact population or group or community that we are targeting. To convert the problem statement into a goal, the problem statement needs to be reframed in terms of the desired change and stated as if it has already been achieved. For example, small farm households in southern Karamoja in municipality XY are food secure. So this is a problem, a positive problem transformation. We have transformed the problem definition into a positive statement. So remember always to mention the what, the who, and the where when formulating your goals or your domains of change. The what are we talking about? We're talking about food security, and it's impacting whom? It's impacting small farmer households. And where? In southern Karamoja, in municipality XY. Take a look at these goal statements. There are some pitfalls that you have to understand. These are two poor examples of how goals should not be formulated. What is wrong with the first goal statement? To improve food security, income, and resilience for chronically food insecure rural women through their social and economic empowerment. There are several things that are wrong here. The first statement has too many goals in the same statement: food security, income, and resilience, etc., etc. It also states how this should be realized through their empowerment. And this is wrong. Goals should never include the how. The how is explained in the project description, in the methodology, and not in the goal. The second statement: to improve local facilities and empower and engage 10,300 targeted households in agricultural productivity, income, and employment towards or improving their basic food needs in the district of Jalapa in San Isabel. So this is so big, such a complicated goal formulation. It has also inside multiple goals. This becomes problematic for monitoring and evaluation, for example, to state whether the goal has been reached or not. So it's not clear if you have more goals inside one statement, which goal are you targeting and which indicators could you have for that, for analyzing, for monitoring the goal. If, for example, data show improvement in income, but not for agricultural productivity, so how can you then understand if this complex multi-layered goal is being achieved or not. This statement should be refined and a causal hierarchy of the different components that are mentioned here should be found so that we can simplify such goal statement. After we have done step 1, which is converting the overarching problem into a goal with a well-thought formulation, we move into converting key problems to domains of change. Domains of change are the main areas in which change must occur in order that we are able to reach the goal. Domains of change statements are determined by simply rephrasing the key problems to indicate a desired result, rephrasing them into positive statements of desired results. A certain number of domains of change may ultimately lead to achieve the same goal. We should choose the words carefully, knowing that each of these steps will need to be measured with an indicator. So we need strong verbs that express exactly or in a better way what is expected to be seen from this domain of change. We should use verbs such as increased or improved or reduced, etc. All these verbs that are somehow measurable, that express measurability. So these are the key problems that you have to transform into domains of change. So you will see each domain of change has its own pathway of change, meaning the underlying or the preconditions that are necessary to achieve this domain of change. All this path of preconditions, of pre-solutions that are needed in the solution tree to achieve this domain of change. These preconditions or pre-solutions were called underlying causes in the problem tree. After drafting a goal and converting key problems to domains of change, we now begin to move through the problem tree to the myriad of underlying causes that we have found. Convert each underlying cause, each of these single problems, in a similar manner, ensuring that you restate each problem as a result. The language should, once more, convey a condition already resolved rather than something that will happen in the future or an action. For example, the key problem, high prevalence of childhood malnutrition. You can change that into a domain of change. A condition already resolved, a positive statement like childhood nutritional status is improved. A wrong writing of domain of change will be, in this case, childhood nutrition status will improve. This is the wrong way to do it. You have to express a condition that is already resolved. The nutrition status is improved. So we could now move to analyzing the underlying causes or underlying problems regarding the high prevalence of childhood malnutrition. And you did that in the problem tree, and one of the underlying causes of this key problem was that children under 5 years consume inadequate amounts of nutritious food. So in the solution tree, you just transform this problem statement into a positive outcome, which will be written like increased consumption of nutritious food for children under 5 years old. Another example of another underlying cause would be children frequently suffer from diarrhea. An outcome on the solution tree would be that there is a decreased prevalence of diarrhea in that area. Summarizing, the easiest way to create a solution tree is to simply invert the problem tree. The problem statements become, the overarching problem statement becomes the goal. The key problems are reworded into domains of change, and the remaining underlying causes are flipped into solutions, which are later sorted into outcomes and outputs. Outputs meaning the products that your project will deliver. Of course, for this to work properly, the causal linkages in the problem tree must be complete and thorough. Don't forget to clearly identify the subset impacted populations, groups who are disproportionately affected by the problem. In your solution statements, for example, improve access to business development training for women and youth. So you have specify exactly which groups are you talking about. Even when one sex is not disproportionately affected, highlight gender inclusiveness in the solution statements. This is important. For example, increased adoption of diversified livelihoods by men and women. Access to gender-responsive extension services have increased. All these type of statements that include your concerns regarding gender issues are always positively evaluated by evaluators of your project proposal. You want to show that your theory of change places importance on the need for these outcomes to benefit all genders. And it should not be only a cosmetic issue. You should as well have activities in your project that will address these problems of gender imbalances. Let me show you an example of a problem tree, a domain key problem, and its underlying causes. Low undiversified income, especially for women, has different underlying causes. So this was key problem number one. And you have converted this into a domain of change in your whole theory of change. So you could have more than one domain of change because you had more than one key problem. This was only referring to key problem one. So you see, you had a problem, you had a key problem with all its underlying causes, and now you have a domain of change with all its solutions. I've been talking about pathways of change, but let us now really define what is a pathway of change. A pathway of change illustrates the series of incremental changes, also called solutions, that when taken together as a set are sufficient to achieve a domain of change, meaning from your intervention, from your output will unfold a series of incremental changes, a series of incremental solutions that ultimately will achieve a domain of change. You can identify a pathway of change by tracing all the linkages that lead to this domain of change. Some solutions will feed into more than one domain of change. That's not a problem and should be considered always as a part of all pathways that they contribute to. One can refer to the collection of solutions as preconditions, comprising both outcomes and outputs. The term incremental outcomes is also commonly used by various actors in the fields of project management for development. If some solutions feed into more than one domain of change, they should be considered as part of each pathway they contribute to. This is also not a problem. Here you have an example of 3 pathways of change, each coded in a separate color. There are multicolored solutions or outcomes that indicate a certain precondition that contributes to more than one pathway of change. The whole time when they have 2 colors means that they are contributing to this pathway of change, but they are also contributing to this pathway of change, right? So these are solutions that in fact are contributing to more than one pathway of change. So you could find some color keys to emphasize that certain solutions are contributing to certain different pathways of change. You can have different colors for the different pathways of change. So this was the part 1 of From Problems to Solutions. In the second part, we'll talk about assumptions and rationals. See you then.